You see $2 trillion get added to the economy. Are you worried about inflation, hyperinflation, deflation?
You have to be. You have to be. I mean, I think I'm not an economist. Don't play one on TV. But I do have to say we had a supply shock with China. And now China's coming back online, but they're seeing a huge demand shock. So the economy in the West is shut down. It's shutting down all over the place. My family's from Bangladesh, and their clients are not paying anymore for the textile exports. Like Europe is they're not paying for, stuff that they produced. And so there's going to be a lot of hardship due to the economic effect all across the world, in the United States as well, And so that's the reality, and we're going to have to face it straight on.
People are, it was interesting because in my family, we're now drinking probably double the milk that we ever drank before. So I was thinking, hey, the dairy industry is doing great. But I've got a buddy, Dwayne Faber, he's a dairy farmer up in Washington State. And he said, people don't realize 60% of all the dairy or some crazy number like that is eaten in restaurants. It's those little pats of butter that come out with your rolls. It's the extra cheese that or cream that gets thrown into your stuff. So they're dumping right now tens of thousands. I don't know that Dwayne is, but dairy farmers all over the United States are dumping huge amounts of milk. And you can't just turn that off. Those cows need to eat. They're going to produce milk. And you can't just turn that off. You turn that off, it means kill the cows. And then you can't turn it back on. So these kinds of shocks to our system are concerning for sure.
They're and I understand we can't I don't think it's feasible to do a national 3-month lockdown. So one of the ideas, and I think Balaji Srinivasan talked about it, and it's been promoted in various publications, green zones and red zones. And so you have this idea of there's hot zones, areas where the infection is at a high frequency, and areas where it's not. There's no reason that the area where it's not shouldn't be producing economically and producing and consuming, and regular life is going on as much as it can. Again, this goes back to what I'm saying about quarantines and preventing travel. That would allow for it. You wouldn't have to worry if you're in Western Kansas that something is going to come from Dallas if there's controls about what's happening. And even if there's controls, truckers can come in and out, healthcare people can come in and out, essential people can come in and out. I'm just saying that if you live in a city with a high infection rate, maybe you shouldn't be taking weekend jaunts in small towns around, the suburban core. I mean, this is the kind of thing that I'm talking about.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I have always advocated for the federalist system where cities are actually the very, very core of your democracy, and that you allow cities to have far more agency over what they do. As more federal money came in and we tied everybody together and we said, hey, we have to treat San Francisco the same as St. Louis, the same as Detroit. They're not the same. And if there was one thing that could come out of this that would be great, it would be that you allow these economic mega regions to be able to govern themselves.
Yeah, so there has to be a little bit more independence in some ways. I think, our just-in-time economy, these extreme efficiencies, which have been great. They've reduced the prices on everything. I think we need to revisit some of that because it doesn't look like it's really robust to shocks in, supply lines need to be more redundant. They need to be more flexible. They need to have more buffer. I mean, this is common sense, right? After what we've experienced. The biggest thing that I hope people's eyes are open to is right now, if you wanted to get beef, it's not that there aren't cows there. It's not even that there aren't enough butchers to be able to cut these animals up and be able to deliver them. It's that the USDA has to inspect these things. There are only so many that were set up and are legally allowed to do it. And so you have supply over here, demand over here, but there's all this red tape. And if we were able to cut that out, we live in a world that does not need to be regulated like we're the 1940s, but we are regulated in that way. People are still treating the meat industry like it's the jungle. And frankly, it's keeping people from having a more resilient system with a lot more local supply. Sure. Well, I mean, I think, in the world we lived in pre-corona, coronavirus, we had we left a lot of efficiencies on the table as well, just because we could, because we had, we thought we had slack in the system. Pandemics, infectious diseases, that's like a 19th century thing. Well, it's not. So we need to worry about that now. But, there could be other ways we can compensate. So maybe we have less free trade. We have more redundancy in the system, but we could look at regulation and we should make it more rational and more efficient because we have to. Maybe we have to now. It's like there's pressure to do certain things that there weren't before. I mean, we know this really explicitly when it comes to drugs and the FDA right now, right? Like,
Say
we
more
know
about
that,
this.
well, just like, like some of the issues relating to the testing of coronavirus had to do with problems between the FDA and HHS and just coordinating who gets approval to do what, and our hospitals allowed to do these tests because, they haven't been checked and vetted. And, we're talking where like a world where like days matter, And
yeah, I mean, the argument, I mean, in the past, it was like, well, we need the government to be here and you can't just try medications willy-nilly. And now you've got people that are like, hey, if we don't try something, these people will perish. I know this is going on in biotech crops, right? Like the amount of years it takes to get a biotech crop to market is absurd. But they put it in there because they had political pressure and they didn't have an existential pressure. And existential pressure has a way of burning off excess regulation.
Well, I mean, so, University of Washington in the Pacific Northwest, they did some tests that they weren't officially allowed to do. They couldn't stop. They couldn't take it anymore. They were just like, people are going to die. So they did some tests, right? The federal government, obviously they're not going to go after them. They sometimes there's the law or the rule and there's the right thing. And sometimes you have to do the right thing, which I think you're seeing. And I think that might serve as a precedent of like, well, maybe we need to change the rule, And so that could be a positive impact of this, frankly, disastrous event that we're going through right now, like looking at the unemployment, looking at what's happening to the economy,